work together. And we are framing this up in a pyramid scheme. So get ready. I'm Rachel Wagner. Oh, gosh. I'm an account executive at Hexagon, specifically focused on the APM product, Hexagon APM, which was acquired last year. And this is officially my first Streamline event as a Hexagon employee, so very excited to be here. So yeah, let's get started. Well, first I actually want to preface this conversation by saying that what we're going to talk about today is not the how we do things, not how EAM and APM work together from a technical standpoint. It is the what and the why is what we're focusing on. We're definitely focused on applicability and not capability. So this is not a software conversation. This is very much a how do we put in place a robust asset management system, and how do EAM and APM work together to support that system? So we'll get right into it. So first I have a question for everyone. What do all of these things have in common? I know, it's a softball. It's a softball question. Individually, they're great, but they are much better together. Especially babies and puppies. I mean, come on, obviously, when those two things come together. But yeah, we are going to talk about EAM and APM and how they actually work together, and how when they are together, 1 + 1 definitely equals 3. So let's start with the what. So I'm sure most people in here are from industrial companies where you definitely rely on assets to help you deliver products, services, or programs. And how you actually manage those assets across their life cycle, what you use is an asset management system. You put in place business processes and a framework to help you manage all of those assets that are creating value for you across their life cycle. And so, regardless of industry, there's really two things that an asset management helps you deliver. The first is keep my assets running at the lowest sustainable cost while maintaining a tolerable risk level. So understanding your risk, keep those assets running. And then the second one is help me make higher quality decisions about how to quickly resolve and respond to any issues that come up. So keep my assets online and help me make really good, robust decisions when anything arises. Because at the end of the day, we actually want asset management to be pretty boring. We like no surprises. We don't want unforeseen things from happening, because what happens when a piece of equipment goes down, a machine goes down, is you spend a lot of time and a lot of resources and a lot of money trying to figure out what happened, resolve the issue, and get that piece of equipment back online. So our asset management system helps us keep things boring, keep the surprises at bay, and keep our assets online and running as expected. Oh, we got a few more filing in. I love it. I think we're at a full house. Huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, coming in. All right, so now that we've established the what, the asset management system, and what we're actually trying to achieve, let's talk about the why. Why would anyone ever invest in asset management? Well, protecting the top line is pretty important for all C-suite executives, all organizations. Protecting the bottom line, also very important. And knowing your risk exposure. This is why we put in place an asset management system, because I'm pretty sure every C-suite level executive has their eyes on these three things. If your assets are online, if they're performing, you're generating production, you're generating revenues, you're protecting your top line. If your assets are online and performing as expected, you're protecting the bottom line because you have line of sight to cost. Obviously, reactive maintenance is a lot more expensive than preventative maintenance. And the big one is knowing your risk exposure. I love this quote. I stole this from Mark LaPlante. Risk is a river. You never step into the same spot twice. Risk is always changing. It's always moving. And it can be hard to quantify. And so the big piece of this is really understanding what your risk is at any point in time, right, as things change, and ultimately being able to quantify that risk. But you don't have to trust me on this one. Let's see what our friend Mr. Schubert from Marsh has to say. Oh, we have no volume. How do I get volume? Oops. Help. All right. We're going to run this back in a second. No? Anything? It says it's muted on here. Like that little button's muted. Is that it? Okay. How do I play this? Okay.
Whether you realize it or not,
Oh, we have some volume.
part of the pricing of that dollar is actually based on how well they believe you manage risk.
Oh, bummer. Well, I have some other videos in here too. Okay. I know. That's a good idea. Okay, I don't know where the sound is coming from, but okay.
Whether you realize it or not, the insurance industry, when they charge $1 of insurance to your company, part of the pricing of that dollar is actually based on how well they believe you manage assets and risk.
Did you hear that? Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, John. Okay. All right. So I'm glad we got that figured out. Obviously, risk is a big measure that we all should figure out a way to quantify. And your insurance provider, you bet they are quantifying that. There is a formula of what they charge you based specifically on how well you manage your assets, because that's all insurance companies care about, right? At the end of the day, is risk. For the same reason why when you turn 25, your car insurance goes down. For the same reason why if you live on the west coast of Florida, your flood insurance is pretty high. Same thing, insurance companies, all they care about is risk and how well you're mitigating their risk exposure. And so for industrial companies that are managing capital investments, that certainly comes with an insurance premium associated with all of those, the insurance company is charging you based on how well they believe you are mitigating the risk to them and managing those assets. Okay, so when we are putting in place an asset management system, there are 7 questions that you have to ask yourself. These are the 7 questions of asset management. The first is just the status of the assets. What assets do I own and where are they? What are they worth? What condition are they in? The next three is really around the effort to actually manage and improve those assets. So, what do I need to do to improve my assets? When are you going to do it? And how much do I need to actually spend, right? Because assets are degrading over time, and you have to allocate some level of investment to keep those assets running and performing as expected. So there's an effort that goes into managing these assets across their life cycle. And then the last one is just, how do I put in place continuous improvement? How do I know what success looks like, and how do I measure it? And then how do I put in place a continuous improvement plan for sustainment? So these are the 7 questions that every asset management system falls under, and the 7 questions you have to ask yourself as you're managing your assets. So if we kind of line up these questions from left to right, you'll notice as you go from status to sustainment, the first 3 questions pretty foundational. They're all about today. What am I going to do today to manage my assets? All about efficiency of actually maintaining those assets today at a tactical level. The first 3 questions really are answered at the shop floor level. But as we move to sustainment, as we move to the right of this, as we're answering all of those 7 questions, they certainly get a lot more strategic. What does continuous improvement look like? How do I actually put in place plans to improve my assets over time? So we're going from present day tactical things that you're doing at a very foundational level, at the shop floor level, to what's my top floor care about? How do we actually put in place those long-term strategic visions to make sure those assets are running and performing as expected across their life cycles? So where do EAM and APM shake hands? And it's really between questions 3 and 4. EAM comprises most of the status. What are my assets? What condition are they in? Where are they? All of those questions can be answered with our EAM system. But as you look into effort, as you look a little bit more long-term, as you look at how are these assets going to perform across their life cycle, that is really where APM and EAM meet and shake hands, and the handoff between the two happens. So, what happens if you can't answer the first 3 questions? Get my microphone back again.
Parts of San Bruno, California were turned into a raging inferno around dinner time Thursday evening. Flames roared some 60 feet into the air as block after block in this residential neighborhood, about 5 miles from San Francisco's airport, were engulfed. Witnesses reported hearing and feeling a large explosion, leading to early speculation that a plane may have gone down.
Pretty dire and pretty significant things can happen if you can't answer the first 3 questions of asset management. San Bruno, California, in September of 2010, a residential pipeline exploded. 50 houses were completely destroyed. 8 people lost their lives. They could not answer the first 3 questions of asset management. They did not know where their assets were or in what condition their assets were. And as a result, very, very dire consequences occurred. So questions 1 through 3, as rudimentary as they seem, as foundational as they seem, as obvious as they seem, like just where are my assets? What's the status of my assets? It helps you draw a boundary around your equipment. You know where they are, what condition they are in. It helps you document what is going on with those pieces of equipment. That's the status. It actually helps you understand from a maintenance perspective, what have I done to these pieces of equipment? How do I catalog all of that knowledge and all of that information into an actual framework, into a system, so that I have all those historical records and I know at any point in time where all my assets are, what condition are they in. What happens if you can't answer 4 through 6? In 2023, so not very long ago, in June of 2023, City of Calgary, a main water line pipe broke. Hundreds were without water for weeks or on severe water restrictions for weeks in the city of Calgary. No asset strategies were put in place whatsoever. They knew where the assets were, they knew the condition of the assets, but did they have any sort of program in place, any sort of mechanism to improve those assets? When they saw cracks and corrosion in those main water lines, did they have something in place to actually set a plan for how they were going to improve them and when they were going to do it and how much they were going to do, allocate to improve them? They did not. They did not, and so again, consequences can be pretty dire when you cannot answer these questions. So, I think we've established the importance, at least, of knowing the answers to those questions, in the context of putting in place an asset management system. So let's go into a little bit more detail around, again, EAM and APM. Where are the handoff points between questions 3 and 4, and what do you do in EAM and what do you do in APM, and how do they work together? So, very foundational. In EAM, all of your asset hierarchy, your definition, your functional locations, that stays in EAM. APM pulls in that information but puts in place a strategy, an asset twin, based on that hierarchy, so you actually can look more strategically. What am I going to do to improve this asset? What am I going to do to monitor and manage behaviors of this asset to keep that thing performing? Asset twin strategy development. So I put this on both sides intentionally because you can actually develop an asset strategy in, let's say, an RCM module in EAM, or you can do it in APM, or you can transfer it from EAM to APM. So these two things really work together, and you can do it in both places, but both serve the same purpose, which is putting in place that asset strategy. From a PM perspective, so when you're looking at your strategy, part of that strategy includes activities that you do, preventative maintenance. Those PMs are actually executed in EAM, while the strategy itself and how well am I executing against those PMs, that happens in APM. So PM execution is over here, while compliance and effectiveness happens APM. Am I doing the right maintenance at the right time? Am I over-maintaining or under-maintaining my assets? That happens in APM, whereas what I'm actually doing at the frequencies that I set out, that happens in EAM. RM and CM, this is reactive maintenance or corrective maintenance. You actually execute that work in EAM, but in APM, we're evaluating that information, any reactive maintenance or corrective maintenance that you've done, to actually tie to risk exposure, to understand how are my assets performing based on the history, and how do I prevent those failures from happening in the future. You account for all your costs in EAM, as it relates to operations and maintenance, but for APM, you're taking that financial information and you're balancing it with, what's my actual budget? Am I overrunning my budget? Am I spending too much on maintenance? How do I reduce my maintenance cost? All that happens in APM. And then from a root cause and corrective action standpoint, you document most of that information in EAM. But from a strategy optimization standpoint, taking the corrective action and actually building it into your strategy, that optimization happens in APM. So again, these are handoff points. They're not meant to be redundant systems by any means. They're absolutely meant to work together, transfer information left to right, so that you have a full picture of what am I doing today, how am I executing my PMs today, how am I accounting for my costs today, versus looking over the long term. How am I spending relative to my budget? How am I doing, on twin optimization? How am I doing on PM optimization? That more or less happens in APM. And then same with decisions. So I'm just going to put all these out here just so you can kind of read them, but I just want to emphasize a few of these. You're making different decisions in EAM than you are in APM. So EAM, again, foundational, transactional, day-to-day. How am I efficiently doing my maintenance? If I know I have to, go do this task, every every PM at certain PM frequencies, I can get really efficient at that maintenance, right? Because I'm doing it over and over again. And so EAM helps you become really, really efficient at your maintenance, your manpower planning, accounting for those costs, right? Whereas APM, you're looking, again, a little bit more strategic, longer term. How do I make sure that my assets are performing as expected? No surprises. Is the maintenance I'm doing effective? This is what Tom was talking about with the effectiveness efficiency diagram that he showed previously. Am I doing the right maintenance at the right time? How do I eliminate maintenance costs? This is how you drive down O&M costs, because I want to eliminate a lot of those reactive or corrective maintenance. How do I prevent the problem from happening in the first place, right? Those are things that happen in APM. Those are the decisions or the questions that you're asking yourself in APM versus in EAM. And then just a couple of myth busters. What APM is not. I know everyone in this room is extremely fluent in EAM, so I want to be clear about what APM is, because I think this is a little bit of a newer concept to some. And so APM is not a module inside of EAM. It is not something that helps you do reactive maintenance faster. It's not another redundant system to manage work execution. It's not something you do just once you've reached this, nirvana of maintenance maturity or data quality, right? I've got perfect data quality, therefore I can move into APM. APM is absolutely an extension of EAM, but it is a separate business process. It is a separate system that brings information from EAM, kind of back and forth actually, but it brings more visibility to performance, cost, and risk. It is meant to deliver insights by exception when things are detected, when anomalies are detected, when it's making recommendations around maintenance that you should do this because we're seeing behaviors or characteristics that might indicate your assets are experiencing more risk than they should. It is something that puts in place a living strategy, and I emphasize living because a lot of strategies, which FMEAs or RCMs are developed, and then they're kind of put on a shelf and they collect dust, and it's like we checked our box, we created our strategies, but they're not actually providing any value because you don't know, are people actually doing all those things that you said, or is the equipment acting as expected? And APM really harnesses all of that knowledge, all of that expertise around how that piece of equipment is supposed to act, and operationalizes it, turns it into a living, breathing strategy. All right, now for a little plot twist. Has anyone ever heard of or seen this show? From the 70s, little 70s sitcom, Three's Company. I know I've been talking all about EAM and all about APM, but there's actually a third solution that I just want to throw in to really complete the picture of how do you put in place the most effective asset management system. So again, a system is a business process. It is all the things you do, all the information that you capture around how best to manage my assets. But it's really meaningfully supported by three different solutions: EAM, APM, and AIP. I'm not going to go into too much detail about AIP, but it really fits into the broader picture of EAM, I'm doing all the things I need to do day to day. APM, I'm surfacing insights about how my equipment's performing and how do I manage, that behavior. And then AIP is even more long-term, more strategic. How do I make those long-term capital investments 5, 10, 15 years from now based on how my equipment is performing now or in the short term? So you can see how these three things really bleed into each other, and if you're putting in place a total asset management system, you're really looking at short-term and long-term and everything in between. So we finally get to the pyramid scheme. And I love this model. It really frames up asset management as a system into a pyramid, shocking, but really reflects everything that we've just been talking about as a value chain model. So if we think of, again, asset management system, there's different layers to this pyramid. There's everything at the bottom, which is focused on how do I manage my individual assets over their life cycles? How do I perform my maintenance? How do I keep them operational and performing today and do all my tasks, manpower planning, scheduling, et cetera. All of those life cycle activities, are at the base of this pyramid. Absolutely foundational, absolutely necessary, but just a piece of the total asset management system. As we move up, we're managing individual assets, then we go to systems, then we go to a portfolio, then we just go to, let's just keep our stakeholders happy. Let's look at the whole organization and map all these pieces, from an asset management standpoint, and make sure that, their objectives are tied to what we're doing, on a day-to-day basis. And if we, I showed previously, left to right, those 7 questions of asset management and, how we move from short-term to long-term, day-to-day to more strategic. This is really the connection between the top floor and the shop floor. So those organizational outcomes, deliverables, those messages, those goals that happen at, at a C-suite level that are, filtered down through the organization, the asset management system is the mechanism to connect the top floor to the shop floor. I want to protect my bottom line. I want to protect my costs. Well, how do I do that at the shop floor level? How do I make sure that I'm keeping line of sight to budgets, that I'm managing my maintenance and O&M, or my O&M spend down here? So this is really the connection between your day-to-day, your strategic, your present, your future, top floor to shop floor. Now, if we put in place, or if we look at it from an action standpoint, like all the activities, all the different things that we do from an asset management standpoint, work planning, work execution, operator rounds, condition monitoring, pattern protections, operational risk, capital investment planning, where do these fall in the pyramid? You can kind of see, again, all the foundational things you do down here, all the more strategic long-term vision things that we do, and how those fold into an asset management system. And this is not exhaustive either. And now, the 3 meaningfully supporting software solutions, business process solutions that fit into this. I'm sure you saw this coming, right? But EAM, again, foundation, absolutely something that we need, critical to an asset management system. It is your foundational layer. Asset performance management ushers that information from EAM up the food chain, but again, looking more strategic, looking at patterns, looking at how assets are operating relative to expected. And then again, moving further up the chain to complete the pyramid is our asset investment planning. These are, more long-term capital investments over longer periods of time, longer horizons. But information that you get at an EAM level or an APM level certainly feeds up this pyramid to an AIP level. Because if you're investing in, large capital investments 10 years from now, you want to make sure that the assets that are performing and installed today are performing as expected. If they go down early, then that changes your capital investment planning long term.
What is EPM?
Capital planning management. Yeah, it's all kind of the same thing. And now the 7 questions, right? So where do these stack up? I'm sure you can guess. Questions 1, 2, and 3, really answered at an EAM level. Questions 4, 5, and 6 around the effort that I'm going to do to improve my assets and when am I going to do it. Those are really answered at, in the middle level, APM. And then long-term continuous improvement, what does my plan for success look like? That happens at the top. So you can see how all these things stack up, everything comes together from an asset management standpoint, and how EAM and APM and AIP work together to put in place a robust asset management system. And if you can answer all 7 of these questions with a high degree of confidence, then you have, reached nirvana. You've put in place an asset management system. So I'll leave you with this. One of my favorite characters from Mufasa and The Lion King, Rafiki, says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And that's it. And then Hexagon Live. Please, everybody join. Questions?